Hello friends, today we're going to talk about the ending of the Game of Thrones. Now I know that nobody really wants to have to do this. It was so terrible that even remembering it can be bothersome. So I want to take a step back and explain from a broader narrative analysis of why the ending of the Game of Thrones hurt so much. Now, just to be clear, I'm not making fun of anybody with actual mental illness or somebody suffering from real PTSD. That is a real thing, and don't be ashamed to go and seek help for that. Anybody can suffer from it, even great heroes on the battlefield or great healers saving lives. The human psyche is a fragile thing, and it would be wise to treat it with great care. So I'm not suggesting we're suffering from PTSD, but it is a sort of post-traumatic stress. It's just not a disorder. It's definitely orderly. You see, whenever we make a great investment into something, and it doesn't turn out the way we like, in fact it turns out in a way that we specifically do not like, we begin to harbor sentiments of betrayal. And when it comes to storytelling, we can feel that betrayal when an ending doesn't just merely not turn out the way we wanted it to, but the way we had expected it to, given how the story was structured and the style that we had become accustomed to. Now, I want to talk about the Game of Thrones, the show specifically, but definitely it is based on a set of books called A Song of Ice and Fire, written by George R.R. Martin. And as many of us know, the show creators, who shall remain nameless, were for the most part sticking to the material of the books up until the point that the show actually went past the material of the books, taking a lot of creative liberties upon themselves that didn't have the backing or support of the actual books from R.R. Martin's mind. Now, the show creators, who shall remain nameless, did in a certain sense try to stay loyal to a certain style that R.R. Martin had set up all this time up until now that we became accustomed to, which was that they wanted to stay loyal to the idea of subverting expectations. Now, while they may have actually done so, they did so at the cost of subverting what they should not have. You see, great storytelling is a communication from the storyteller to the audience, through the characters of the environment and the world itself being told. Good storytellers shouldn't have to spell out what their messages are very explicitly for the audience to understand what's really happening. It's much more engaging and interesting a story when the audience has to figure out what's going on. George R.R. Martin in his books does this by actually telling the story through different perspectives, first-person perspectives, to allow the audience to kind of piece the story together from the different perspectives. You see, one of the great things that storytellers tend to do, some of them, is set up certain puzzles, certain mysteries and puzzles that the characters, the individual characters within the story, cannot figure out themselves, that only the audience can figure out that story because the audience is privy to knowledge beyond the individual characters, and that knowledge is given to them by the author. This can cultivate an idea of excitement and interest in the story from the audience wanting the individual characters to know what they have figured out, to let them know, I figured out the bigger story, the impact, or what happened here, or how that made sense, and I really would love if these characters figured it out too. But whether or not the characters know that at all, it should at least have an impact on the story if a mystery set up by the author for the audience to solve is solved in the story, in the books, or the show. Now, Mr. R.R. Martin actually does an excellent job at setting up a number of mysteries for the audience to solve, for the readers to solve. Not only does he set up mysteries to seem very important and impactful, he sets up little games in solving the puzzle of the mystery for the audience by showing false prophecies or lies or misheard things so that it's not easy for the audience, so the audience can enjoy in trying to come up with different theories. And when the show followed the books, it certainly did translate. People wanted to know more about what's really going on, about some of the prophecies, or about certain lineages. And a number of people ended up actually reading the book or going online to read fan theories about what's really going on, to help figure out some of these mysteries. Now, I did make a video prior to this one trying to explain how one of the messages in this story is that the right to rule is made by the powerful. In that video, I argued one of the messages is that the right to rule a people is a matter of power, not a matter of justice. There is never really a right to rule. Every different person in their own perspective will project an idea of their righteous justice to rule a people. But nobody has such rights. Even the gods themselves in this story are quarreling, and we see their quarrel play out through some of the characters. Anyway, so while this idea does disparage the idea of lineage being important, if lineage is not important since everything is just seized by power, then why should we care about one of the main mysteries? That's just it. We should care about it because it is a mystery. In this book, one of the most important puzzles set out by George R.R. Martin is Jon Snow's lineage. Figuring out who's Jon Snow's parents is such an important mystery, and the show creators, who shall remain nameless, know that it is one of the most important mysteries. As some of us know, the show creators should have known how important this mystery, specifically Jon Snow's lineage, who his true parents are, because George R.R. Martin would not even give them the rights to produce a show based on his work if they were not willing to make an investment into his story to figure out and solve this puzzle. They had to demonstrate an investment in the puzzle of Jon Snow's lineage and solve it correctly to be given the reward of producing the show. So the show creators, who shall remain nameless, know that this is a really important puzzle. So when the show finally did go past George R.R. Martin's actual books and they began taking creative liberties themselves, they did try to stay loyal to the idea of subverting expectations. Of course, George R.R. Martin is also very good at that. He subverted from the idea of the stereotypical fantasy novel tropes about the hero always surviving and having clear villains and clear good guys. He actually does an excellent job and is praised for doing an excellent job at displaying the diversity of human character within his books, and that brings it a level of realism that subverts from the stereotypical hero fantasy tropes we are used to. That is subversion. And I would argue that the ending of Game of Thrones is very subversive. They were very successful because we expected, after watching a long great show, that it would have a great ending. That expectation was subverted. Success? But what a storyteller should never subvert from is not giving the return on investment from the investors. I'm not talking about financial investors. I'm talking about those who invested their time, interest, and effort to solving the puzzles that the author had set out, that the creators had set out, the audience. When the audience is willing enough to try and solve some of the puzzles set out in the book, you know that the show creator or the story writer or the author has done an excellent job. They've cultivated enough interest in the show or the puzzles to get people to want to solve them. That causes a great deal of an investment from that audience. And when they do not get a return on that investment, it is a great Great betrayal. While the ending of the Game of Thrones has a number of big betrayals to the audience, because we had invested so much in a story being a certain way, at least having consistent characters, having good writing, having complexities and well thought plot lines, when all of that is betrayed, we will feel dishonored. The world stopped making sense, characters that were known to be intelligent were doing foolish things, people were hiding near the dead while fighting an enemy that could raise the dead. Characters in one scene would claim that they don't want power, only for a few scenes later to claim that they're willing to take power. A lot of things didn't make sense with the ending, but as I argue, the greatest betrayal is the betrayal that we get when we don't have a return on the investment of solving certain puzzles. Namely, that puzzle, possibly the most important one, the one R.R. Martin asked and demanded they solve before he gave them permission to produce the show. Who are Jon Snow's parents? For those of us who figured it out ahead of time, we got nothing figuring it out. They announced it in the show, said, hey, you're right, you solved the puzzle, great, these are his parents. But it didn't matter, because it did not impact the story at all. Once the revelation is there for a very important puzzle, it should impact the story, or else the return on investment is not really there, and the audience did not get that. Now, because we're discussing the ending, I assume everyone did watch the show or knows sort of what I'm talking about, because we get a reveal of the most important puzzle, that Jon Snow's parents actually allows him to make a claim to the throne because he has Targaryen blood. He has both the blood of the first men because he has Stark blood and blood from the Targaryens, which makes his blood a mix of those who are close to the ice, I guess, and those who are close to fire. Song of Ice and Fire. However, this really didn't have any impact on the show at all. At most, it caused some trouble in the relationship between Jon Snow and Daenerys. Now, that lineage is supposed to be a part of the biggest supposed prophecy in the books about Azor Ahai, the prophesized one, the chosen one. Who is that person? Well, it's not explicitly spelled out in the show, but what we do know is that Jon Snow, despite having his revelation of his lineage, didn't actually fulfill some of the parts of this prophecy, this puzzle that we had invested into trying to figure out. Because Jon Snow didn't end up killing the Night King. Someone else did. So what was his role? And while we do find out that he does kill Daenerys, plunging his sword into her as if it was going to create the Lightbringer to fight the Night King, it doesn't matter because the Night King is already dead. I guess we're supposed to appreciate that we were able to predict that Jon Snow kills Daenerys based on the prophecy, but really, Jon Snow just kills her and then goes back up north. There was nothing really impactful about this prophecy. There was nothing really impactful about Jon Snow or his lineage in the show. Why did we invest so much into this thing? So I think this betrayal is the worst one. Because the power of the creator or author to communicate to the audience through the individual characters and allow the audience to know something that the characters do not creates a kind of tension between the audience and the characters that the show creator or the author actually intended. And that tension of wanting those characters to know needs to be rewarded, not just by, oh, they find out at some point in time, but that finding out has a great impact. It has to affect that whole world. But it didn't. They betrayed us in a number of different ways. Characters, storylines, nonsensical world, time leaps. But the greatest betrayal is the betrayal that they left us with a near useless Jon Snow and a useless prophecy of Azor Ahai. What did it matter who his parents were really? All he did was kill Daenerys, which seems to have come from his sense of justice anyway. Nothing mattered. I think that is way more hurtful than anything else that they did wrong. And they did a lot wrong. There's a lot of criticism for it. But for me, it's that. If we solve a puzzle from the author, make it worth it. And if you don't, why did I bother? You screwed with me. I hate you. And now, I have no desire to ever suggest to anyone to watch this show. Why should they? The joy and time and effort that you spend wanting to know what will happen and trying to figure out who will survive and who will do what doesn't pan out to what was specifically set up by the author and the showtellers in the beginning. Subverting expectations should never be so great to subvert the return on investment by the investors. That's not just bad business, it's bad storytelling. It's a betrayal that will leave your audience not just remembering a story that ended badly, but feeling betrayed by having spent so much time in trying to think about the ending before it went bad. Just to be clear, I watched Game of Thrones and I watched a lot of the theories online. I didn't read the books. I'm not like a super big fan of A Song of Ice and Fire or George R.R. Martin. You can probably find real people to talk about this show in a much greater depth if that's what you're looking for. This is just my kind of analysis and psychoanalysis of the real impact the bad ending had and why it was so bad psychologically for a lot of us. And I think I make that case because of this argument about how storytellers are trying to communicate something to the audience, and usually they do so through wanting the audience to solve puzzles and not getting an investment on return. That's why I think the major failure happened to the ending of the show. I'm sorry I just repeated that whole thing again for you, but I'm just basically saying I'm not like a Game of Thrones expert. This is just my show and my opinions and stuff like that. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Oh, that's like my opinions and stuff. Like, nobody needs to agree with me. I'm just like a goofy guy. Like if you agree, dislike if you agree. Oh wait, no. Click like if you agree. Click share if you disagree. Click comment or something.